Alright, hello everyone and welcome to session 8. We're going to start to dive into the Australian flower essences in the next couple of sessions until the end, and we're going to set things up a little bit differently to how we did the Beach flower remedies, which was essentially to memorize how or what Dr. Beach used the flowers for, and then regurgitate that information. These ones, we're going to take a slightly different approach. We're going to go through the different plant families that are native to Australia, and then we're going to talk about all the different essence sets, the Australian essence sets that utilize those particular plants, and then we're going to have a chat about some of the differences and similarities between the families, or the plants from the different families, and even the same plants from different essence sets. And then we'll chat about the doctrine signatures, and this is a chance for you to start to get really interactive on the LMS if you're not already, and start to have a think about in more detail the doctrine and signatures and how they may apply, and I guess look at things a bit more critically in a way. So we'll start with a brief overview of the Australian essences, which when we did the history of flowers way back in session 1, if you remember, we talked a little bit about this. So to begin with, we've got a great example of an Aboriginal pit healing ceremony, which is kind of a really classic example of how flower essences have been used by a particular tribe. And I may pronounce this incorrectly, but I believe it's Nyungan. I'll show you the pronunciation. It's just there. A selection of native flower essences from the Nyungan. This is a particular tribe in Western Australia. They're still here to this day. Like I said, there is a YouTube clip for you to have a look at one of the elders who has since passed, about how this assisted him in his journey with contracting polio. And flower essences has been used in Australian history, Australian Aboriginal history, for quite some time. It's not a new concept, and it's certainly not restricted to flower essence sets. There are ways to use the essence of flowers that don't require bottles. And this is a great example of one. So this is a close-up of some of the flowers that have been selected. So you may be able to recognize some of these flowers. These flowers are within the living essence range. So if you choose to become familiar with the living essence range, you'll notice gelled and wax there, and the Belga black boys on the side, or native grass trees. And I believe that's Western Australian smokebush, but I could be wrong. And each of these flowers have an energetic imprint, and when they're used, they are harvested originally by specific people usually. They're soaked in billabong or stream overnight, and then they're placed over the coals and drenched with water, and that's what steams up through the individual. Here's a great example of somebody laying on flowers as they receive a healing. And so this is one way to use flower essences. There is numerous ways that people have used them over the centuries, but this is one particular tribe's use of flowers as an essence. So the patient lies on top, they're covered with kangaroo skin, or in this case with bark. And of course you then have sound therapy, chanting, clapsticks, didgeridoos, and that's when you're looking at energetic healing, sound therapy has a unique vibration of its own and can be used in conjunction with flower essence therapy. And then the flowers are steamed through and permeate the individual. And the individual is taken care of, the physical needs are taken care of, they're given water when they need, etc. So they can enter completely into a deep healing state. And they can absorb the energy of the flower into their own being. So just a little bit more about the ideas behind flower essences themselves. So plants through their flowers express their desire for transformation or evolution, their healing pathways. Our attraction or repulsion to certain flowers reveals something about our own healing pathway at any point. And this is a philosophy but the words here are from the Living Essence range, so from Bano. But you notice this idea throughout a lot of different essence sets, that this idea that people will be really attracted to or really repulsed by certain flowers. And when you dive deeper into that and you start to look at the doctrine of signatures, or you start to look at, okay, have other essence sets use this flower, what's it been used for in the past, or you choose to sit and perhaps meditate with the flower and find out more about its healing pathways, what it's helpful in facilitating as far as healing goes. And what you notice a lot of the times is that it seems the subconscious is able to pick up on the colour, on the shape, essentially on the doctrine of signatures, and it interprets it and decides if it really, really loves it or really, really dislikes it. And this is the idea behind using the cards in clinic. So using the example that I gave you in Barno's book, they have an example of a specific method of diagnosis, which we'll go into later. But also I want you to just take a moment and think back to perhaps childhood, to a flower that really stood out to you, perhaps that you really, really loved, that you felt such an affinity with, that just kind of filled your heart with joy whenever you saw it. You were really attracted to a particular flower. And for some people, that flower, that love for that flower has stayed with them all the way through their lives, and for other people it changes continuously. And they'll all of a sudden be very attracted to a particular flower at a particular time. And now that you know a bit about the doctrine and the signatures, and you've got, a couple of great resources that we've given you, you might like to have a think about, well, what might that flower be used for? And does that correlate to my emotional state now, or my emotional state when I was a child, lessons that I was dealing with? Kind of, has that flower been part of my healing journey, or highlighted where my healing journey was heading? It's an interesting thing to think about, and if you feel like it, you might like to share that information with others. And you can do the same thing with cards, or with photographs of the flowers themselves, and really looking into the flowers. And there's a beautiful meditation that you can do. If you have a flower in your mind right now, just kind of keep the colour, the shape, everything about that flower. Try and keep it in the forefront of your mind. If you're better with visualizations, closing your eyes, then close your eyes if you feel comfortable. And start to breathe deeply. Again, in and out through the nose. There's no need to alter your breath here. Just deepen it a little. Just telling your conscious mind that it can let go a little bit. It can allow you to relax a little more deeply. And with each exhale, just letting go of something from your day, something from this moment that's just perhaps keeping you from that relaxed state. Know that it'll be there when you need to tap back into it. And in this moment, letting that go. Don't worry if your mind comes back to the thoughts. Just keep focusing on your exhale and letting go of maybe a muscle that's holding on a bit too tightly. Check your face, your jaw is relaxed. Your eyes are relaxed. Move down through your neck, your arms, your fingers relaxed. With each exhale, the trunk of your body relaxes. Your hips and pelvis relax. The muscles of your legs release and relax. All the way down to your feet and your toes. And start to breathe a little more comfortably. Feeling everything that doesn't need to be held in tension. Feel it release. Relax. And now I want you to bring to the forefront of your mind the image of that flower that you love. It may be from childhood, or it may be from your life right now. A flower that you're really attracted to. And I want you to expand that flower until it's bigger than you. And it grows up around you until you're sitting in the very center of the flower. And you're tiny in comparison to this ginormous flower that's all around you. And I want you to see in great detail the color and the shape. I want you to see the sunlight streaming through the petals and engulfing you in that healing ray. Feel the warmth from the sun as it permeates through your being. Breathe in the aroma and bask in the colors and the shape. And take a moment to notice if anything has changed. And then as you're ready, watching as that flower starts to shrink back down to normal size, slowly shrinking until you can pick that flower up and hold it in your hand. And just give thanks to that flower in whichever way seems appropriate to you. And take a moment to think about what the color may have symbolized to you, or what you may have felt, the shape of the flower. Or even perhaps if that meditation, if something came up during that meditation for you. Maybe nothing came up, but if it did, what was it? Was that useful information? If it was, jot it down, take a moment, maybe press pause. We're going to keep going. But this is one way to start to meditate with flowers and start to tap into that more poetic nature of the doctrine of signatures. Because sometimes it's a very subtle idea. Sometimes it's only in the moments of quiet reflection that things become more obvious. So I want you to start to play with these ideas. It'll give you some deeper insights into essence makers, what they do all day long. So with Australian flower essences particularly, the plants of Australia are generally quite unique, and it's got a lot to do with the history of the land itself. Certainly separating of the continents from Gondwana, Australia did become isolated for millions of years, and as a result we have unique flora and fauna, some of which are only found in Australia and some of which have been spread since. But Australia has some really amazing plant species that aren't found anywhere else in the world, and it had a lot to do with the separation of continents some millions of years ago. So this is a rough guesstimate. It's about 50% of native plants to Australia exist nowhere else on the planet. And due to the incredible diversity of our continent, plants have adapted really interesting models of survival. And as a result, we have some really unique flowers that people come from around the world to look at. You just have to look at Western Australia as a great example of that. The wildflower season, which is usually around September, October each year, draws people not only from Australia but from around the world. There are plants and flowers there that have not even been named. They're so numerous, and the diversity is really unique. And this is a question that I get quite a lot and that I hear quite a lot as a flower essence therapist, and that is, if I am Australian, do I need Australian flower essences? Or more specifically, because I lived in places like London, what's unique about the Australian flower essences in flower essence therapy? And is there something that makes them more special, that makes them more important, that makes them more superior? All of those sorts of questions get asked. And there are kind of two different ways to look at this discussion, because it is a discussion. It's more of a philosophical discussion or debate more than anything. And people will argue both sides, sometimes quite vehemently, but in my experience as a therapist, people respond to many different essence sets, despite their nationality, despite their culture, despite their upbringing. So I'm not sure that, and this is purely my experience, I'm not sure that you require only the flowers from your area. But when you think about biophilia, which you would have studied maybe in history of healing, and probably naturopathic philosophy, when you look at the influence of our unique sphere, of our unique environment, this is the environment that we're in constantly. This is the environment that influences us on a physical level, on a mental level, on an emotional level, and perhaps even on a spiritual level. It could be useful to gather healing from the local environment. When we look at the bigger impacts environmentally, for example, on things like carbon footprinting and bringing flower essences in from all around the world, as exotic as they are, it may be that the environmental impacts are one of the decision makers for you as a therapist, and the bigger part of things. It's also argued that the land itself has a unique vibrational signature, and that choosing plants from the healing that the land already holds, the unique vibration that the land already holds, can help to bring people back into balance from that area. Another thing that I hear quite a lot is that Australia is quite a pristine environment in comparison to other parts of the world, and that there hasn't been a great deal, there hasn't been massive world wars like you see in parts of Europe. There hasn't been a great deal of trauma that's been potentially imprinted into the land itself. And this is all things to consider. Do remember that there were probably tribal wars that occurred, but perhaps nothing on the massive scale that we see through some parts of Europe. So that's one argument, one side of the argument, and there's lots of nuances in there as well that you may think of yourself, or perhaps you've heard. The other thing to consider is that we're being influenced continuously by the globe at large. We're global citizens generally. Most people travel a great deal. Most people have connections with non-Australian individuals, and all of that will also influence the energetic imprint of the environment at large. And also remember that some of the flowers that are used within the Australian essence sets are flowers that can be found overseas, for example. They're not all uniquely Australian. And so there may be, for people who are more interested in this idea of kind of a brotherhood or a sisterhood that spreads throughout the land, this idea that we're all connected, that we don't have to stick within our communities anymore. We can kind of open our gaze and open our hearts to the world at large, and that perhaps that is an evolutionary step forward. You've probably all heard of the song Age of Aquarius, for example, and this was all about this idea of moving out of this is me in my unique space, and moving more into the influence of the world at large, and how what we do can influence the world, and how what is happening in the world can influence us. So they're two different ideas, and I'm not going to say that there's a right answer here. I think as a therapist, you take these ideas and you mull over them for a while, and perhaps you chat with your peers about it, and you come up with your own what sits comfortably for you, and have that influence the essence sets that you choose to use. It's not my plan to sway you one way or the other. So we're quite lucky in Australia in that we have these uniquely beautiful native plants that have their own healing potentials. We have a vast array of flowers that are available. And so for those of you wanting to start to play with making up your own essence sets, or perhaps you want to do your own healing pit, perhaps you just want to put muslin cloth over the top and kind of take the morning dew. However you want to start to play with flower essences, you have so much available to you, usually on your doorstep. And remember, they don't have to be particularly beautiful. They can be weeds, what we consider weeds. Just start to think about the document signatures, start to perhaps sit down and move into that quiet space. See if you can tap into that more poetic nature of the doctrine of signatures. So next we're going to talk about the flower essence varieties that we're going to cover in the next couple of sessions.